So look at this picture on the screen. Here you see a lineup for one of the more recent episodes of Piers Morgan Uncensored. And depending like where you kind of fall on the political spectrum, you're probably going to be annoyed by different people. But it's safe to say a lot of you are leftists. So hanging out and doing a debate stream with Piers Morgan, Michael Knowles, Tommy Lauren, and Destiny probably sounds like a bit of a nightmare to most people. And it's something I can safely say I have like 100% no interest in ever participating in. But you guys might have seen Piers Morgan's show going viral recently for a host of reasons, but if you're into leftist YouTube, like a fair few leftists or like American progressives go on that, so you see those clips go viral with people, I guess on the internet space. And I guess you might be asking, like, why Piers Morgan? Why is this guy hosting stuff that features like Hasan, Cenk, and like loads of random right-wing influencers? And I wanted to talk about that today because obviously I'm from the UK, so Piers Morgan has a bit of a different reputation here. I know most people like generally don't like Piers Morgan, but here's the sentiment I see a lot, and I think this encapsulates him, but it also encapsulates the image he cultivates, because Piers Morgan is not a real person. The Piers Morgan you see on TV and social media is a creation of the real person Piers Morgan to basically appeal to as much people as possible in a controversial way. So the common sentiment you hear about Piers Morgan is, I don't like Piers Morgan, but... And what the but will be is a liberal person will say he said this reasonable thing about, let's say, vaccines. A right-wing person would say he said this reasonable thing about like woke nonsense and stuff. Because Piers Morgan just wants to be relevant. That is why he does all of these things. He doesn't really have any ideology. Like, I believe he is a fairly conservative person, but Piers Morgan's ideology is attention. That's why he's happy to take his show onto YouTube, because everyone knows now it's so much more relevant than traditional news media that his old format of his show was constrained by. And today I want to talk about like the history of him, basically how he acted during the 2019 election and the pandemic to really show you what this guy is about and how he is all about pandering to everyone, not minding if he pisses you off, but giving you enough that you feel like you have to give him credit. For example, how many pro-Palestinian people has he criticised online on his show? A fair few. But then every so often, he'll go hard after like an IDF spokesperson. So there you go. I don't like Piers Morgan because of that, but he did do this. He always has an out for you to give him some sort of credit, so you don't totally hate him, and so you don't totally discard him with the rest of, the right wing, or if you're further to the right than his image, discard him as part of some sort of like liberal elitist. So I want to talk about his show, I want to talk about his history, I want to talk about all that stuff today. Before we go any further, please like the video. Follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Instagram, mainly my personal, my travel Instagram, and also Threads and Blue Sky, and check out the Patreon if you want to support my work. I'm trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible. Benefits include access to the Discord server and also early access to my videos, and you can watch them on Patreon ad-free. So before we dive into various things in Piers Morgan's history, let's just like dwell on his new show for a little bit, because I know a lot of people are probably more interested in this part because you see all your faves on his show. So obviously this has been a thing this year. So Piers Morgan to move uncensored show to YouTube. This is back in February. In an interview with The Times, Morgan said he will now focus on growing the YouTube channel when it had previously aired at the 8 PM slot on Talk TV for the past 2 years, saying, "It's clear there's a huge global demand for the content we're making, but the commitment to a daily show at a fixed schedule with all the editing and time sensitivities that involves have increasingly become an unnecessary straitjacket. People are watching content on YouTube rather than conventional television. I have no problem with that. You can't defy audiences or tell them how they should be consuming. I could happily interview Elon Musk for 3 or 4 hours tomorrow and the audience would lap it up, but the nightly restriction of having to go into a studio at 8 PM when sometimes there is nothing happening and literally fill time. No one wants that. The question becomes, why do it? And I read you that, and I read you his own words on it. Just paint the picture. Piers Morgan isn't some like truth-telling journalist. He isn't someone who I think even enjoys grilling people as an interviewer. Like Andrew Neil, you guys will know him from that Ben Shapiro clip if you're American. But you got the sense that he kind of enjoyed like grilling everyone like equally, and that's what he had a reputation for, even though he was very conservative. And it's something you feel like he was probably, you know, passionate about in some ways. I don't really respect him, but you have to hand it to him that as an interviewer, he did go hard after like pretty much anyone he interviewed. Now, Piers Morgan tries to do that in some ways, but not really, because he lets his own image bias, or maybe even his own personal political bias, come through. So he'll definitely go harder after left-wing people, but he is trying to do this on his YouTube show, because again, he is all about the image of, I don't like Piers Morgan, but. So he has to throw stuff to basically every single person. Now, something I will also say is, he's obviously not the producer on the show, right? So he has people signing up all these guests. And I will say it's smart on his part to pivot to a more social media audience. But his producers just get loads of people who are actually only popular online. So someone like Destiny isn't going to be a regular guest on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC. He's not going to be invited on the BBC, is he? But on this, he's being invited because Piers Morgan's producers know that brings in a lot of people. And then you have someone like Hasan or Cenk, and they both have their own different audiences. That will bring in a lot of people as well. And you contrast them with opposing viewers or just, you know, talking heads that you know they'll disagree with. Because Hasan, Cenk, and Destiny probably have some of the more consistent followings who go on Piers Morgan's show compared to just like rando Republicans like Tomi Lahren, who, you know, is she relevant? I mean, I don't really think so. Someone you know from the Trump era originally, but no one's really tuning in to Piers Morgan to watch Tomi Lahren. So she's there as someone to go against people like Hasan and like Cenk. And you do get this with some like more liberal left-wing guests. I think like, is it like Nomiki Konst, who used to work for Majority Report or something? I've seen her on that. And this isn't to say anything about me, but I would say I would have more people watching Piers Morgan because I was on it than someone like her. So she also serves the purpose of, I am the progressive person for maybe a famous conservative to bounce off, and that's why I'm here. So it's just all designed for a viral debate, because at the end of the day, Piers Morgan doesn't want a clash of ideas because he cares so much about, I don't know, free speech and civil or uncivil discourse. He cares about entertainment, and he cares about being at the centre of it because he loves inserting himself into everything. And that's something you probably wouldn't be aware of as much if you didn't grow up in the UK and seen this guy for a long, long time. But let's talk about Piers Morgan in the UK. Let's talk about him in recent years before talking about like his pretty terrible history. Like, this isn't a good guy at all. This isn't just some random like TV pundit journalist who is controversial for like pissing every side off. He literally is a bad guy. So Piers Morgan genuinely did suffer from Corbyn derangement syndrome. He did suffer from Jam Man Bad. Like, he was insane, like rabid anti-Corbyn. And I do believe that was something he was sincere about, because Jeremy Corbyn seemed to break everyone's brains in the UK in the pundit, political and journalism class. Because, of course, he threatened their very power because he vowed to do things like reform journalism and break up the big press in this country owned by billionaires. So they made it their goal to completely destroy him as some sort of like anti-Semite, like the most racist guy in Britain. And the Labour Party have, of course, picked up on that after the election because they want to cozy up with the press. And you see that recently, Starmer, who said he would never be associated with the Sun newspaper, started writing for it, and then today said he happily accepts their endorsement for him becoming Prime Minister. Because people who want power in this country always cozy up to the right-wing press. So yeah, Piers Morgan firmly had Corbyn derangement syndrome, and he voted for the Conservatives in 2019. Pretty public about it. But then, this is what I'm saying, there's the but. So the COVID pandemic obviously happens. Piers Morgan has a show, and he uses that show and his Twitter feed to go after the Tories basically non-stop about their failures on COVID. He also promoted like lockdown, he promoted things like vaccines and stuff, so people on the left would be like, I don't like Piers Morgan, but you got to respect him doing this. And then he went after all the Tories, Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, was going on about Partygate, everything like that. So he built up like quite a lot of credit during COVID because he was pretty much one of the loudest voices on TV who was going after the Tories, to the point where most of them were actually afraid to go on Good Morning Britain because they know he'd grill them about everything they were doing. The hypocrisy, the corruption, everything like that. And even I found myself saying like, oh, you know, this guy is a bad guy, but he's doing some good as someone who wants the attention. He wants the focus on himself. So he might have some genuine principles, but he is really going after the Tories for this. But of course, you know, what happens is he gets into that massive controversy about Meghan Markle because he was just completely obsessed with her and having meltdowns consistently, leading to his exit from Good Morning Britain. Obviously, a lot of people said it was, you know, a racist fixation, but also because Piers Morgan also wants to have that credibility with people, he's a massive royalist. Now, this is probably a genuine thing, but at the same time, it also plays well with the majority of the country because say what you will about the royal family, I absolutely despise them. Pretty much in politics and journalism, you have to pretty much pay lip service to liking the monarchy. Keir Starmer is never going to come out and say, we should get rid of the monarchy, we should reform the monarchy. He wouldn't dare say anything like that. But it's also an easy way to get attention, and it's also an easy way to get people to like you. Because a lot of the people attacking you for Meghan Markle are probably people that will hate you no matter what. So for Piers Morgan, it's another thing to throw at people, yeah, I support the monarchy. I support, you know, science with things like lockdown, vaccines. I support Ukraine. I hate Putin. Even though I have like some right-wing fans who blame everything on Ukraine, I'm going to be principled and I don't care if that pisses people off. So again, that gives him credit with other groups. So he does so much contradictory stuff to stay relevant and to stay in the good graces of at least someone. So during the pandemic, he was staying in the good graces of more left-leaning people by going after the Tories. Just before that, he was absolutely rabidly against Corbyn, so everyone who supported Corbyn absolutely despised him. If you think of Piers Morgan through that lens, that's how you understand his YouTube show and why he platforms the people he platforms, and why he will platform people who are super controversial, but then platform people who like everyone else likes and stuff, or says something contradicting the last guest, and he might even give him like a friendly interview. This guy constantly like changes his opinions on stuff and changes who he's sympathetic to stay relevant. And you could see that perfectly play out with the Israel stuff as well. He starts off, like a lot of people, supporting Israel no matter what. But as it becomes clear and it's getting worse and worse and worse, and he senses, oh, you know, where I'm relevant as well in America, there's a growing sentiment on the right as well that they don't support Israel. Loads of left-wing people don't as well. So I'm going to start saying stuff about the Palestinians. Like, oh, sure, Hamas are bad. We can all agree Hamas are bad. But at the same time, children, women, this has just gone on too long. It's too much. I'm starting to have doubts about my Israel support. Again, why is he doing that? Does he actually care? Maybe. But also, is it good to say, yeah, I care about Israel, I care about Palestine, and I might annoy a lot of people, but people are going to give me credit for this as well. And that's also part of his YouTube channel. I think Hasan said this. He said, you know, most people aren't platforming pro-Palestinian voices, right? So I go on Piers Morgan because he gives me that voice. And, you know, that's fair enough in terms of Hasan going on that. But there's also an ulterior motive to Piers Morgan getting Hasan on for this and debating him or anything like that. And again, it's because he wants that credit. Oh, Piers Morgan, at least you would have a conversation about it. CNN wouldn't even invite people like this on. Even though you disagree with me, Piers Morgan, at least you let me on. So you're in my good books to that. It's calculated by Piers Morgan. It always has been. But let's get into some of the darker history. Like, he has a long history. He's been around for so long. But here's something I wouldn't really talk about until recently because of legal reasons. But back in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a big scandal about journalists, or so-called journalists, hacking celebrities' phones and accessing their voicemails to get scoops. And now it's happened at the News of the World, and it happened at the Daily Mirror, and Piers Morgan was the editor of the Daily Mirror. And he consistently denied that he both never ordered anyone to do this, and he never knew the stories that were being published could only be written because the author of that story had listened to a hacked voicemail. But then recently, because of more legal proceeding, you had this last year in 2023, but an article by Prospect by Nick Davis, Piers Morgan's phone hacking denial still utterly unpersuasive. On the 15th of December 2023, Piers Morgan stood in front of his London home and told the assembled cameras that he had never hacked a phone, nor told anyone else to. Nobody has provided any actual evidence to prove that I did. His statement was provoked by the judgment handed down in Prince Harry's high-profile case against Mirror Group newspapers last year, in which the Mr. Justice Fan Court found that there can be no doubt that editors, which included Piers Morgan, the former editor of the Daily Mirror, knew about the phone hacking in their newsrooms. That case heard actual evidence of two different kinds. First, there was general evidence about what happened across the Mirror newspapers as a whole, a large collection of emails, invoices for private investigators, and witness statements, which had already been deployed in an earlier trial in 2015. The findings from the judgment in that trial were adopted in the Prince Harry case, and continuing to describe these early general findings about the Mirror titles, Fan Court said there was a widespread culture of phone hacking extending from journalists to editors. Editorial staff not only knew about the practice of phone hacking, but were likely to have conducted it themselves. It existed at the highest level on the journalism side of business. David Seymour, who was a political editor for the Mirror Group as a whole, said he'd been walking through the newsroom one day in March 2001 when he came across Piers Morgan standing with a group of reporters. Listen to this, Piers Morgan had said before playing a recording of Paul McCartney singing a Beatles song in a voicemail he'd left for his then partner Heather Mills. Mr. Justice Fan Court said, Mr. Seymour struck me as a man of intelligence and integrity. I accept his evidence without hesitation. Benjamin Wegg Prosser, formerly Tony Blair's Director of Strategic Communications in Downing Street, described having a Chinese meal with Morgan at a Labour Party conference in September 2002 and asking how the Daily Mirror had got the story earlier that year of the then England football manager Sven-Goran Eriksson having a relationship with a TV presenter Ulrika Johnson. He said that Morgan had then described the technique for accessing the voicemail, adding words to the effect that that's how he got the story on Sven. The MGN lawyers did not challenge this evidence, and I'll link the article, but it just goes on to show loads more testimony that made it pretty clear that Piers Morgan, at the very least legally, he knew this was all happening. He knew this was all happening and he didn't stop it, and it had numerous occasions of him bragging to people that they were hacking celebrities' phones and accessing their voicemails. Again, he'd always denied this, and this was a massive culture at the time. And why I even talk about this is to show you that people like Piers Morgan are not journalists. People like Piers Morgan have always been parasites, and they completely rely on the celebrity culture and exploiting it for their own gain. And the way they view news, I wouldn't call it apolitical, but it's not about any political bias on their part. It's all about attention, because they were firmly involved in this type of celebrity gossip press, which is still very popular in the UK. They weren't trying to break stories to expose the powerful, to expose the corrupt. They were breaking stories for attention, like the England manager is having an affair, and that story is so juicy, I don't care if you had to hack his phone to get it, and the legal consequences of that, it's worth it. Because we can get that juicy headline for our paper. But who does that serve really? The England manager has an affair. Is that something we should all be outraged about? Something that needs to be known to the public? No, of course it doesn't. Because he's not a journalist. And even though his career has changed completely to becoming a YouTube show host, you have to think about it in the same way. He doesn't care about the issues. He doesn't care about Israel-Palestine. He doesn't care about hearing both sides. He doesn't care if you come on, and even if he's debating you and it seems sincere, he's debating you for virality and attention, because that's the mold of so-called journalists Piers Morgan has always been, coming out of this right-wing press in the UK. So yeah, he might be conservative, but again, they'll turn on conservatives, these people, if it makes for a good story. And that's the gutter press in the UK. It's the same with their relationship with the royal family. Everyone knows they usually have a cosy one with them. But if they can put the knife in at any time, like they did with Diana or Prince Harry, they'll happily do that as well. Because again, they're not driven by politics most of the time. They're driven by the attention economy. And Piers Morgan and his producers have successfully done this on YouTube as well, where, you know, if we actually look at his channel, I have some screenshots I'm just looking at it recently, the views are pretty insane. Like here, look at this. So, latest videos, 422,000 views in 4 hours for a debate between, I think, Dave Rubin, Megyn Kelly, and Anthony Weiner on Trump. You'd think that wouldn't get that much attention. 400k in 4 hours. Roger Waters versus Piers Morgan, an hour long, 800,000k a day ago. Two days ago, about Biden, Tommy Lauren, Michael Knowles, and Destiny, 1.6 million. Keep going down. The one with Cenk and Hasan, 3.3 million. Even the one with Francesca, 500k. The one with George Galloway, 1.3 million. RFK Jr. and some other people, 400k. Roseanne Barr achieving that relevance, 700k. Jeffrey Sachs talking about Russia, nearly 900k. Like, for this type of political content, these views are absolutely fucking crazy. And that's because of how they have just like put all these people in a room together. Like he was saying, you couldn't do that on cable TV because of the time constraints. With YouTube, it's fine. And get all these like micro-influencers or maybe political influencers in the social media sphere, have them come together and fight. Makes for good business, makes for good viewership. People love watching debates anyway. So he's becoming relevant again with a new generation as well, because you'll have people who watch Destiny and Hasan now watching a guy called Piers Morgan, who they might have only heard of for being on like Celebrity Apprentice, being kind of friends with Donald Trump, and you know, maybe appearing on Fox News. So that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.